All right. All right. Welcome everyone to the Habitat issue triage for March 13th, 2018. We've got a bunch of the team on the call, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started and see how many issues we can churn through. All right. I'll share the screen. All right. Ian, would you mind sharing the link in general for people to follow along at home if they so choose?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So we're showing issues from across all of our repositories, sorted newest to oldest, and we'll just dive in here. All right. So this is one. Good that you're on the call, Ian, because I wanted to talk a bit about this. This is one that was in the Habitat repository, and I moved it over to Builder since it pertains to Builder. Mostly is an older issue around collecting operational metrics, which we do now in Builder. We're sending stuff to Datadog. There was a portion on here in your original issue, Ian, where you talked about having the development environment also include a stats listener. So the StatsD client that we're currently using is actually uses some Datadog specific extensions. So there may be some additional work that we would need to do to, make it send the non-extended metrics to a local development stats aggregator when in the development environment, and then sending it to Datadog when we're in a real environment. So how do we feel about that?
Well, this is about the local environment, right? This is for developers developing Builder, so it's really for us and anybody else who's working on Builder.
Yeah, so part of it was like we should just collect metrics, which we are doing now. Yep. And then there's a separate part here about also having that as something that developers can have access to in their local environments.
Yeah, so I think for the most part, there really isn't any more work that we should be, or we need to do here, because if you're on your own workstation and you just want to test that some metrics are working, it's like a two-line thing to start up a node stats. There's a StatsD listener component. That's what I do when I work on my workflow, and you can then watch all the metrics flowing through. And then really the test is in a acceptance or production environment, and we have the dogstats-d now there. So from a workflow standpoint, I think we have everything that we actually need to do our work for collecting and using these operational metrics. So we should talk about what else is missing if we have the basics now.
Is it worth adding maybe a paragraph or a couple lines in the developing doc? Basically, like if you told me, Salim, how to do that and I can replicate it, that might be enough.
Yeah, I'm happy to add that in there.
The thing that I think that we would need to test is that if we start sending, say, like tag metrics, which we are talking about doing with Datadog pretty soon, that's an extension to the StatsD sort of format. So as long as like whatever thing that we're using locally can cope with that extra information tacked onto the end of the whole stats line, then that should be fine. But if it chokes on that for some reason, then we would need to dig a little further.
Yeah, I'll try that out before I post instructions. The other thing on tags is I'm not sure if version 5 of the Datadog agents will support tags the way we want it to, because we're kind of blocked on v6 right now.
Okay. All right, so we'll just say we'll look into writing out some documentation on how to run a stats collector locally and see how it works with Datadog specific metrics.
Sounds good.
And what I've found also, Chris, with just regards to driving triage, sometimes it's a lot for the person that's hosting to also have to leave the comments and stuff. So totally.
Just gonna comment on that.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to have one of us that's sitting here with our thumbs up our butts write the comments for you, and then you can focus on like putting it in the right labels and leading conversation. That way you don't have to do both things. I'm happy to help with those comments and stuff if there's anything.
All right, we'll do that on the next one. All right, so that seems like a builder vertical issue. Documentation. Chore feature?
Most of the time I think chore is for documentation.
And this is probably on the easy side. Related to observability. That's a nice, colorful tags. All right.
I think of chiclets when I see that. I like it.
All right, cool. Up next, investigate reported tar exporter issue. I won't read it. Let everyone take a second to refresh themselves on this one.
Look at that unwrap.
Yeah, that's
like a bug.
That's pretty.
Yeah, if that's reproducible, that does feel like a bug.
Okay,
so even if that's not supported, or like we shouldn't be able to do that, we should not be like basically dumping out with a thread panic. We should at least be like reporting a good error back.
Yeah, so we've got, seems 2-ish. Well, okay, so that's clearly one thing. Then the locally installed package. So right now, the behavior here is consistent with our other exporters.
Right.
That if you give it something, like we have to resolve that something, so we're going out to Builder and finding the thing. And if you want to do something that's only available locally, you would have to provide the path to the heart file directly.
Right. Yep.
So did that change? Because I thought that the way that we did that validation was after checking Builder, we checked the local cache for whatever was newer.
We do, but no. So what we do is, if you're given, origin/service, we have to resolve that to a fully qualified thing. So we'll go out to Builder and say, what's the latest in stable that satisfies this? And that gives us a fully qualified identifier. And then we should be looking locally, like if we have that artifact already present, then we don't need to go out to Builder again to grab it, and we can just use it like that. However, if you're building something, if you're trying to package something that's not on Builder for whatever reason, that's going to fail unless you give it a path to the heart file that you have locally already. Because in that case, it doesn't need to go anywhere because it's already got everything that it needs. So that behavior is consistent with our other exporters and everything else that needs to grab packages from Builder and do anything with them.
Our legacy behavior on some of these did a pretty naive thing. It just went into like the hab packages, like it tried to find literally directories on disk and then just copy them rather than treating them as like actual habitat packages. And that's only because that previous behavior kind of predated when we had like more like viable packages. Basically, we didn't have a package repo at that point. So that's work, unfortunately, we did later than we should have, which led to some of these kind of confusing issues. Yeah, that's basically why. So yeah, I guess there's probably two things going on there, or maybe we need to just create a new one with just to reference that one, that like we shouldn't be arrowing out that command like that. It should just say, yeah, package not found, or whatever the right thing to do is there. And document the behavior, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, fix this panic and then document the normal behavior of this. And I think this is probably the source of maybe some broader confusion, because like I just spent the afternoon, not the whole afternoon, but spent some time this afternoon writing up a wiki entry basically about this behavior for people wanting to build packages depending on things that don't exist in Builder. And so it's going down this exact same code path. So maybe some more in-depth documentation on how Habitat in general is dealing with these things might be useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can make a breakout issue for this, for the like failing in the wrong way as a bug on our exporter. I'll do that now.
Okay. All right, so do we want to close this one and refer to it in follow-up issues, or keep this one around?
Well, if we can figure out how to address the confusion, either through something on our website or form issue, then I would kind of consider that sort of closed with documentation. That sound
okay?
I think, right? Otherwise, it's a good reminder that we still have to write something.
Yeah. So we'll tag this documentation. Bug for it's a documentation bug, I guess. And also in that this is apparently changed behavior from the previous tar exporter. Easy fix. And developer experience vertical.
Sure.
All right. Who wants to write up some follow-up on this particular issue, about how we're going to write up some documentation?
I can leave that comment if Fletcher's doing the breakout issue. I'll just update on.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. All right. That one is down. Next up, a core plans PR from Fletcher.
Cool. To-dos.
use our INA, etc. package to use the XML sources.
So yeah, this came up when I was refreshing some of our base plans, and when I was looking for updates in this package, this is somebody's project to it's basically populates the like etc protocols and etc services that like every operating system uses when you say, you know, what's the port for TC, you know, SH or something.
Port for TCP.
Yeah, I was going to say for TCP. Damn it. So what I found when I looked is when I made this package the first time, wherever I found it was probably based off of something I found on either NixOS, Arch, Linux from scratch, all the above. And what I found when I was kind of checking my work against what they're doing in like Arch Linux land these days, they're using a different source which references like I think it's like the IANA driven XML spec thing, and then they put it through a tool basically to like consume from a bit more of an upstream authority spot, and it seems more up to date. So I didn't really want to get into that like quite that day because we weren't broken, and those things don't tend to change very often. But I would imagine if Docker got added, if that was like an official port one day, like it might not be in ours, but maybe it's one now kind of thing. So I hope that was just enough of a breadcrumb that like we should probably look at updating our package to that one. And I think Arch Linux made it was like date driven or whatever versioning scheme they worked, it was compatible with ours, like not meaning, a new one would be like future dated or like a higher version than whatever we had. I can't quite remember how these were versioned, but it's not critical, but it would be great if that happened.
Okay. Sounds cool. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Core plans. I guess that would be a feature for that package.
Yeah.
Maybe. Any thoughts on version changes? If they're doing a different versioning scheme, we might end up adopting that, and that would effectively be a major version change.
That's probably how I would think about it. Yeah, I looked really quickly, and it might be in the text of that like I think that switching over to how Arch was doing it, we won't have a problem that like it would go back in time, and so the old version would mask the newer. So I think it's going to work out. But yeah, I would consider it major. That's kind of why I didn't jump on it right away. It just sort of felt like a couple hours of work that I was kind of nearing the end. So
yeah, okay. Ian, what's the INFCP label?
That is for RFCs. When an RFC has been accepted, it enters into the final comment period, which is the FCP period, or I guess technically FCP, not FCP period, because that would be redundant. Yes, exactly.
All right, we're missing some vertical tags.
We are indeed.
I guess it ends up being the builder vertical because that also includes core plans, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
All right.
Did those maybe get added after our retagging effort, maybe?
Well, I thought I added those in there. It might just be that I boogered it up.
All right. Yeah.
All right. I think we've got a help wanted label, or we should have a help wanted label. I think that was something that you added earlier.
Yes. If it's not on there, then that's another thing that should have gotten added in there. So I'll just run that really quickly.
There is a T help wanted in the Habitat one. So yeah, if there's not in Builder, then it might just be temporarily out of sync.
It's boogered. All right. I don't think there's any additional comments that we need to make on this one, right? I think everything in the main text of it covers everything.
Yeah.
All right. Triaged. Document an SLA and escalation process for core plans. This is for issues and not pull requests. All right, so this sounds like a way for people to file issues, like for urgent, security patches, and have that bubble up quickly to the rest of the core team so that we can take action on things in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think that's going to be on our backlog. It might even be, it feels like it's borderline in flight. I don't know if that's exactly the address currently, but I know Nell's working on a few documents.
Yeah, I think that she's started putting something together for this.
Okay, so there are tags you can think of that would be useful aside from core plans?
Yeah,
and
core plans, maybe documentation. I guess.
I think it's a documentation chore. Like we've already, I think, already had the conversation about what these SLAs look like, how we want to handle them. I think it just needs to be documented, basically, so the community knows how we deal with that.
All right. All right. Anything we should comment on, or are we good to go on this one?
Probably good,
Right.
I think.
Deafening silence means good to go. Next up, this looks like something that has popped up in previous triages before because of the needed discussion tag.
Yeah, this one is this one too.
Adding extra arbitrary metadata to a package that could be gossiped around and acted on.
Yeah, I have a feeling it needs a little more discussion.
Yeah, do we want to take the time to kind of share initial feelings and thoughts about this and have that discussion right now?
Could probably do that. Somebody has like a clock, I'd say like 3 or 5 minutes.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Let's discuss it.
Cool.
I already have a timer going. Huh.
So I'm currently investigating a sort of related issue to this, which is, I think, coming at it from the opposite direction, where people have requested the ability to specify a bind, but one that does not have to be present when the service starts up and can come and go and as in the operational life cycle of the service. The sort of canonical example of this would be like if your service is a load balancer and it's binding to some bind that is the services that it's load balancing. So like it could start up and it's not load balancing anything, but then services join the ring, populate that group, and it picks it up and is able to re-render its config and load balance across them and sort of be able to dynamically respond to things. So that's something I'm currently digging into. This looks like it's kind of the flip side of that, where it's maybe not flip side, but related to where it's not looking at one particular group necessarily. Could be looking at things across multiple groups, but that all have this metadata attached to them that is important to the service. So it's kind of interesting in the complementarity between those two.
Seems that there's still some sort of contract that needs to be there between the producer and the consumer of this metadata. So how would we handle that? This seems pretty wide open at this point.
Yeah.
Unless the vision is just to have an arbitrary endpoint for whatever, not necessarily. Well, I guess the question here is more focused on like having interactive services, but it's the kind of thing where we provide an endpoint that's just can be arbitrarily expose whatever kind of data. Then maybe theoretically your app could be tweaked or tuned or something to consume that data off of that arbitrary endpoint. Or maybe it's the kind of thing where you could even have some kind of a hook or something that looks for like a definable arbitrary data set that may or may not be available, sort of like what you were talking about, Sion.
You need to namespace it, right? Because some metadata could mean different things to different people, right?
Yeah.
I think we've also found if we were to redo some of this stuff, we probably would be exposing like typed data, if possible, out to know that like what you're sharing is so we do that with our ports. Is like we try to guarantee that you're getting an integer, I think a non-zero integer.
Yeah, there's some basic checking around that.
Yeah, so like likely that's if we were to do work on a feature like this, it would I guess I would advocate for looking into like perhaps it being a type thing so that you would know what to expect of what type, so that it's not just something by name, is to know that like I'm dealing with, I don't know, something that's like Boolean like, so I'm going to get back a true or false and I'm not going to get 0 or something. But that's probably like additional requirements on top. I don't know if, so we have the, what is it, package exposes. I always get a little confused between the two. We have an interface in the package to say like, I have information that I'm going to share out with this like known name, and then a way to plumb an internal config value like through to that sort of flat namespace. I don't think that quite gets the feature done because we might be talking about package metadata rather than like dynamic configuration data, but maybe there might be a mechanism to signal that it's metadata that you're after and not configure, or something. Like the exposes mechanism like might be a way to do the announcing, but maybe that's not sufficient. I don't know. Maybe it's not free form enough, because I know on the consuming side we say that, hey, I have this bind and I'm also expecting this value to come off of the bind kind of thing. So it's still like a reasonable contract that's a little less likely, less subject to interpretation, I guess.
Yeah. Jay also did make this prototype of a new type of bind, so that kind of makes that complementarity explicit, where the bind is like some sort of selector, which can be used to, I guess, map to more than one name, so that you could.
So for the sake of the call, like I don't know that we have to really define implementation details right now, as much as like, is it a feature that we feel like
Right.
we would accept.
Yeah, I was just bringing that up as sort of another data point as we're thinking about things. I definitely don't think that we've got anything like this right now, and it seems like it could be a useful thing. It would take a bit of deep thinking, I think, to sort out the implications.
Yeah, and I know, at least speaking for myself, or how we've sometimes added features in the past, is we typically wait until there's some kind of driving use case. Or so I know I'm much more convinced when I see like, oh, it would solve this problem, this problem, this problem. We know like we can't solve it any other way, or it's like a lot easier. So always having like example use cases, for me at least, certainly helps to like think it through. I just get worried about sometimes solving a problem that's in search of a solution. And I know in this case, that is probably not likely the case. But occasionally that sometimes you get a feature and you kind of wonder like, how would this be used, or where would it be used? Because there might be, there could be an alternative way to slice it. But yeah, having said that, like this seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Do we have a way of like, so if we put this in the backlog, takes the needs discussion off, some way of annotating this as something that, you know, either we'll
think we have a
eventually,
needs
or
decision.
something that like.
Yeah, I think we have a needs decision tag, I believe. Is that right?
I might have deleted that.
Okay. Or the other way is we can take it out of the triaging, keep the needs discussion on it, and that's a trigger to like keep touch base with the needs discussion ones.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we will move that into the backlog. Still thinking about the proper way to implement this.
Yeah, I can leave that comment if you want me to, Chris.
All right, you knock yourself out. All right. Metadata for packages.
This kind of goes hand in hand with the one we just finished.
I think it dovetails, but I think there may be some differences. I know we have talked in the past about adding things like the SHA sum of the sources, like as an actual like official piece of metadata, not just like an arbitrary thing, but something that our tooling specifically deals with. And I think we've also tossed around the idea of some other additional official metadata that we could add. But we don't have anything for user-defined arbitrary metadata right now.
I think I'm of the opinion that if we're going to do the previous issue, that we should do this one too. I feel like they're closely related.
Probably.
Yeah, I think you sort of need this one to do the next one, right? Otherwise, how do you get the arbitrary metadata into the system? I mean, I guess you could inject it, but yeah.
So another way of thinking about this might be metadata for packages, yes, but what if we flipped it to a runtime thing and called it static configuration? Like rather than the dynamic one that, you know, like you can load in and override and stuff in the tunables, like what if we had something that was just static, which like gets put into the package and you could read out, which means you could just put stuff in and get stuff out. That's enough of a, like reframing it in my mind, like that seems like a kind of a useful thing. Because it would be in a known place, it would get loaded in, you know that it wouldn't be overridden. whether that's implemented as metadata or not, I don't even know if it matters a whole bunch, or we take all of our metadata and expose it as like static config. But like, I guess until thinking about it just now like that, it kind of makes a bit more sense in my mind, as it's just like a mutable configuration, like from the supervisor's runtime point of view, that you could like consume and use. Yeah,
that's interesting, because at that point you could say that it doesn't have to be something that's actually baked into the package. It could be something that you, as the person running it, could say, like, I say that this metadata is important for my purposes on this package, and I'm gonna, tag it as such. And
right.
if you're running it, then you could have a completely different conception of the metadata that you want to have exposed and operate on, but it doesn't have to necessarily be determined by the package author.
Oh,
Do we have quorum? I mean, I think we probably have quorum on thumbs up on this, right? I felt like a majority of us are like, yes.
I mean, I'd like to explore it more. Yeah, this seems like again, it seems more than reasonable.
Yeah.
And it feels kind of weird if we said yes to the previous issue and no to this one. Like,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these were added like one after another, too. We want to keep the needs discussion on this.
Yeah, I think that's probably good.
Okay. Actually, we forgot to add a vertical. All right, so this would probably be developer experience and supervisor together.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right.
I can leave a comment on that one as well.
All right. Could someone find the other package, the other issue?
Yeah, I'll do that.
And tag it with those two verticals as well. All right, thanks. All right. It's another Fletcher issue. Update the airlock check script to check the network namespace. Is this still a thing?
This was done.
I think cool. Pretty sure it was. Is that a reference there?
Yeah, maybe this just wasn't tied in.
Did I not say closes blah? That's weird. Or maybe in the comments?
Yeah, I think that's the case. That sounds like what we wanted it to do.
So yeah, I did make that a little more mature to understand if there's a network namespace, and then also it would be able to check inside it to make sure the interface was in there with an IP address. So I know that's in there. So, usually I'm really excited to close these kinds of things. So it's weird I missed it. I'd call that closed. It's good to me. Is it worth just adding some labels onto it anyways?
If you like. How would we like to tag that?
Probably builder chore shell.
Sure.
Yeah, it was pretty easy, I guess.
All right.
Easy or less easy, but yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. Locally installed packages do not obey update strategy. Yep. So.
Like while it's running, install it?
No, it's actually obeying the strategy. If you give it the path to an artifact,
oh yes,
it generates a spec file that has a fully qualified identifier in it, which can try and update all it wants to, but by definition, there's never going to be a newer artifact that it can update to, so it's
That's right.
never going to update. So,
and that's partly why in the past we've just not allowed this, or we've warned super explicitly. We might want to, if it doesn't already warn, it might not be a bad idea that, like, by the way, you've asked to run this package forever.
yeah, I don't think that we warn now.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not that it's not obeying it. It is obeying it. It's just
It's like
never gonna be able to
pedantically
do
correct,
anything.
but in a way that'll surprise people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this.
I guess it's kind of documentation in that it's not exactly a bug. If it's a bug, it's like misinterpretation of what we're trying to do, and we could.
It's a bug in like expectations. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's behaving as we intended it to. It's got to be better at making that clear.
All right.
And yeah, one way is we could add a warning into the supervisor. Let's see. At least load. I'm trying to remember if start would also be affected.
It would be as well. Load's really easy because you could just, well, actually in load and start, like at the very beginning.
Yeah,
like
it's like, oh, is it an artifact?
Say, I'll do it, but you should know that.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen. That being said, we don't have a super. I mean, there is a workaround. It's not the most beautiful thing, but if you do have just a heart file, what does it mean to have a heart file but then also want to update it?
That's the question. It's hard to define that, right?
And that's kind of why we went in that direction, is like, what are your intentions? It seems like you don't want to talk to the internet by installing this thing locally. Versus you could install the package locally, so it's available, and still call load on it, but give the fuzzy match and then say at once. And that's a bit, I think, clearer to say, like, I didn't give you a version and a release. It's fuzzy. What I'm implying to you is, like, I want you to use the internet, check in with your depot because I gave you an update strategy. So it's like a little clearer, I guess. Again, that might just be pedantic, possibly, but you can get around this by like installing that heart first, and then calling the same load command and just use a package identifier instead of the heart.
And you can also do a force load.
That's true too. Yeah,
changing the identifier, which
would
functionally get you the same thing.
Yeah, the heart one was a little more like, I think the guest audience is more like in development when you're just trying something out. Like, I just built a package or somebody just gave me this result, I'm going to try and just run it directly. There might be use cases in production for that, like if you're super air gapped. But again, if you're super air gapped, what is the likelihood you're going to have an update strategy going on or pointed at another thing because you just installed something off like a mutable artifact?
I think this user has filed a couple air gap related issues also.
Yeah, okay.
So this may also tangentially play into the air gapped builder / depot.
Exactly.
Work.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's at least a documentation bug related to the supervisor. Probably impacts developer experience and supervisor verticals.
Yeah. So we happen to have some code work refactoring going on in the supervisor, kind of in these commands right now.
Right.
Which isn't to say that we're not going to do it, and we could do it, but likely there might be a slightly different implementation landing pretty quick. So we may want to like add to that as it kind of makes its way.
There are workarounds now, at least two. One is install the heart file beforehand. Even that I think would have some issues because it would try to, unless you give it the fully qualified identifier, it's still going to try and go to builder to resolve an identifier before it can look locally to see that you've got that artifact installed. So you would end up in the same spot of having a fully qualified identifier in your spec file.
Although if you said have SVC load, whatever it is, origin/name with an update strategy, yeah, it would contact the depot, but you've given an update strategy, which is going to imply some network ping. Like if you don't want to update, just don't add the update strategy. I think the intention would be for this to like update with newer things. Unless the idea is is like load a version and then out. That's why I was wondering, and then like out of band, call install with a new version of the heart and then see what the supervisor does. That's not really a use case that we've really gamed out. That would involve some file system watching probably. And